Finally, I'm going to recreate this model using range names for you so that we can illustrate how they can be used. So I'm going to go ahead and clean this up. So when I click on any cell in Excel, normally you see the name of that cell, C4 over here. If I want, I can actually name this separately, a name other than C4. I go here, that's one way of doing this, and say, well, I want this to be called purchasing price. And then I hit enter. Then when I go to any other cell, over here I see the regular reference F10, whatever. If I go to C4, instead of seeing C4, I see the name purchasing price. And if you open up a workbook and want to see the list of the names that were created in this workbook, you can click on this downward arrow and you will see a list of all the names. Another way of seeing all the names is going to the formulas ribbon, going to name manager. That will give you all the names, their values, which cells they're referring to, etc. And then if I try to look at the cash flow in and out in year 0, I know that the in is 0. And if I look at the cash flow out, I'm going to say equals C4. But since I have given a name to C4, I no longer see the value C4, but I actually see the cell name. And then here I still do G3 minus H3. Now, you may say to yourself, if I have a spreadsheet with a lot of inputs in it, or with a lot of cells that I'd like to name, it'll be hard to name everything. But there's actually a fast way to name cells in Excel if you put proper documentation. Here's what I'm going to do. I have these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cells. I'm going to give them cell names all at once using a very simple tool. To do this, you need to make sure that each of these 6 numbers have a label. The labels are in the same orientation. They are all to the left of the number. So I highlight the names, labels I created and the cells. I go to the formulas ribbon. I say create from selection, and it says create names from values in the left column. So for each one, it's going to look at the left column and use that to create a name. I hit OK. Now when I look at my name list, as you can see, I have now interest rate, maintenance and operating expenses, etc. And the cool thing again with the drop down list here is if I choose any name here, let's say we choose rental income, my cursor directly jumps to that cell. So now when I'm trying to write my cash flows in and out, look what happens. Well, this is going to be rental income times occupancy rate. And now if I give a name to a cell, that acts as an absolute reference, so I don't need to worry about pushing F4 or adding dollar signs. I just simply copy paste it all the way down and I get my values, and the cash flow out is going to be maintenance and operating expenses. And then I do that again all the way down, and then this is going to be the same, and the last here is going to be rental income times the occupancy rate, the money I'm making, plus the selling price, and the outflow is going to be the same, maintenance and operating expenses. So next I'm going to show you how to name a range. I'm going to name this range year 1 through 10 cash flow as year 1 to 10 flow. When you're naming cells or ranges, you need to make sure that you don't use any special characters. No blanks, no pluses, minuses, etc. So I named cells I4 through I13 a name. So if I go now and click on my name list and choose year 1 through year 10 flow, I see automatically my range here. Now let's use the NPV function. NPV, the interest rate, and then I choose my year 1 through year 10 flow. As you can see, it gets highlighted, and then plus my flow from year 0. And then I get the same answer I got before. Once I have my names in a spreadsheet, I can play around and edit those names by going to the formulas ribbon and go to name manager and update the values here. The last thing I want to show you is the auditing tool in Excel. Let's say you opened up a workbook that somebody else created and you don't know how the values are interacting with one another. For example, let's say you open up this workbook and somebody told you this 8.5% interest rate is not correct. And you may ask yourself, I wonder what parts of the spreadsheet is affected by this error. Then what you do is you go ahead and click on the cell that you're interested in. You go to the formulas ribbon. In the formulas ribbon, you have this formula auditing portion. There, you click on trace dependence. When you trace dependence, it tells you, oh, interest rate is actually used here. And it's also showing you another workbook because I use the same thing in the other model. But it's telling you, oh, well, that number is directly used here. Trace dependence show you what cells are dependent on the value in this cell. And if you want to remove that, you go ahead and click on remove errors. Or let's say you came here and you realize, well, you know what? The cash flow in year 2, I'm not quite sure how this is calculated. Well, we have range names here, so it's easy to see how it's calculated, rental income and occupancy rate. But you have a big workbook and you have no idea where things are coming from. You go ahead and click on G5 or whichever cell you're interested in, and you need to figure out, well, what numbers factor into this. You go ahead and click on trace precedence, and it tells you, oh, that cell is calculated by using C5 and C13. Let's remove the errors. And trace precedence and trace dependence work in multiple consecutive layers. Let me show you what I mean. NPV, for example, if I look at precedence, it tells me, well, it uses interest rates and it uses these numbers. If I click on it again, then I realize, oh, well, these numbers from I2 through I13 are calculated by using G through H13. And then those are calculated by using these values. So if you will, this gives you another way of looking at the influence diagram that was used to create this particular worksheet.